Oh yeah, there you go. So.
Can you see my screen? We need to show him. Yes. Yes, that's my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. So, hi to everyone. Thank you for coming and to attending our presentations. This day, the topic was prescription. So we have to work with a huge data set of half a billion rows about prescriptions in the UK. So out of these half billion rows, I decided to focus on just one specific drug, and in particular antidepressants. I chose antidepressants because I realized that it's kind of hot topic in the UK because the antidepressant trend is increasing. The prescription of antidepressants is increasing after the economic crisis. So I decided to focus there and to understand if our figures can help us understanding something more about this drug, these antidepressants. So yeah, I started from this article from the BBC, Is England a National Antidepressants? And it raises awareness about this topic and it presents some figure about it. And I try to transpose the topics of this article on Tableau. So this is my first dashboard when it loads. This is my first dashboard. On the left-hand side, here we go. On the left-hand side, we have the map of England with the rates of prescriptions per adults divided by CCG, which are the authority for health in England, and one can choose a metric between items every 1,000 patients or the total quantity per patient of the drug prescribed. And both the metrics shows how the northern authorities have the highest rates of prescription per adult. On the right hand side, we have the trend. So from October 2010 to March 2015, we can see that the prescription of antidepressants has increased up to 50%, which is kind of a high growth rate. Some drugs even almost doubled the other antidepressants, which are not the other drugs here listed. And yeah, this is the trend in England about antidepressant drugs. So I tried to go a little bit more in depth in this and try to understand if there are some drivers behind this trend. So I created this second dashboard in which I try to understand if some economic factors were behind this trend. In particular, the expenditure, so the price, the expenditure for the net ingredient cost of these drugs, and the index of deprivation. So I wanted to see if there were a correlation between deprivation in an area and the number of antidepressants prescribed, which I found, because if we use this chart as a filter, which is the number of items every 1,000 patients in March 2015, we can see that for almost all the drugs, we have a correlation between the index of multiple deprivation and the prescription of these drugs. The only one in which the correlation seems to be more smooth is this one, the first, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are the most common antidepressants used in the United Kingdom. For instance, Prozac is inside this chapter. And we can see also that there is a huge volatility in the net ingredient cost for this drug, which seems to be driven by some evident factors here and here, which I was not able to investigate properly. I don't know why there are these peaks here, but I will go in depth. So yes, this is all I have. Yes, this is all I have for this project. This overview of the antidepressant prescription in the United Kingdom. I used 4 different datasets because I had to blend the original dataset we had with figures for the index of multiple deprivation and index and demographic data for each CCG, for each authority. So
Okay, cool. Thanks.
questions?
Any question?
So yeah, I mean the spike, the 2013 spike is interesting.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if maybe they the NHS switched what they were prescribing. Maybe moved to a slightly more expensive. Took the decision to move a slightly more expensive drug, but something that's
Or the launch
has better effect
maybe.
or whatever.
Or maybe it's the launch of a new drug. I was not able to understand it by on the newspapers, so.
Oh.
But it's something to investigate, of course.
Mm.
Yeah. What's interesting is the correlation, in my opinion, because it's a quite significant model. So high deprived zones are more likely to prescribe antidepressants. That's the
Sure.
finding.
Yeah, I mean the map on the on your first dashboard sort of stood out to me. Living up in the north, and everything's just highlighted red, basically.
Yes.
I was just going to ask you.
Seems like in London you love to pay a lot of money, but you're happy to do it.
Alex.
I was just going to ask you, Nico, how your antidepressants? How did you link? Also, we had a big list of all kinds of prescriptions. How did you sort of get the data for your antidepressants?
How
did you separate? Did you?
It was in the chapter. It was a field, so I just filtered the chapter on the original dataset, and then I merged the demographic data because I didn't want to use just the absolute data for quantity or items. I wanted to understand if there were some relationship between the population, maybe. So, and also I filtered out all the younger people. So these are patients above 19 years old.
Okay.
Because otherwise they were biased. Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.
Next one.
Oh, sorry, just before we move on, I did want to give a bit of feedback on that, on this chart in the bottom right-hand corner. I wasn't quite sure about the using the coloring, because you effectively have, first of all, you've got a negative. You've got negative 9%. Going through to 47, and there's nothing in the color scheme you've chosen. There's nothing to distinguish that's negative.
Yeah.
You have to look at the value itself in order to figure out that is a negative value. So it'd be nice to see. You've got the sort of blue to red. It'd be nice to see that continue through. And then I also wondered about just maybe using just bars here instead of squares, because you're just reliant on, it basically looks like kind of 4 shades, whereas, and then the numbers don't quite correlate to shades. So I think there's maybe a bit of work to do with that chart in the bottom right-hand corner, but otherwise I thought everything was great.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, second one has...
You should.
Okay.
So
Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My topic is on antibiotics. Antibiotics are important medicines for treating bacterial infections in both humans and animals. Antibiotics are losing their effectiveness at an increasing rate, so much so that the UK's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Dame Sally Davies, said that antibacterial resistance represents a threat that may be as important as climate change in the world. Previously, it's not been so much of a big issue because new antibiotics drugs were constantly being developed as humans grew resistant to the antibiotic drugs. But as highlighted by the Prime Minister last year, there is a striking lack of new antibiotic drugs under development. That's because of a variety of reasons, one of which is that they're not very profitable for pharmaceutical companies because you use them for a short period of time, let's say a week, until your infection is cleared and then stop using them. A report by Public Health England last year suggests that the consumption of antibiotics is a major driver for development of antibiotic resistance in bacteria. So it's something that needs to be controlled. This wasn't made in Tableau, but it just shows that we're consuming more than the rest of Europe. So the UK last year published a cross-government 5-year antimicrobial resistance strategy, which includes antibiotics. And one of the key aims of the strategy were better access and use of surveillance data. So then what I've done is I have created this. So this map shows the GP practices grouped by CCGs, which stands for Clinical Commissioning Groups. So every GP practice belongs to a CCG who is responsible for commissioning healthcare services. So you can see it's kind of similar to Nico's map of antidepressants, where Northern England and bottom left-hand side of England and bottom right are prescribing more. And you can see that trend of time as well, so you can scroll back all the way back to 2013. So the reason why it's I've only got quarterly months, I've only got it as quarters there is because the population data for these GP practices is only released per quarter. So that's why I've shown it like that. And then because Public Health England wants GP practices to compare their data with national and geographic trends to see if their rates of prescriptions are higher than others and investigate why, and if they can reduce these, then create this table, which shows all the different indicators. And I've also created new columns for, let's say, total items, so you can see that and understand it better as a percentage of the population, well, not as a percentage of the population, but the total number of items per 1,000 of the population, which makes it easier to understand for the end user. And then you can break it down by CCG. So I wanted a column for the average, but I guess I can use the class this morning on LOD calcs, because I wasn't able to create a column for the national average across all GP practices, but that's something I need to do. And next of all, we've got a simple bar chart which shows the different types of antibiotics being prescribed, and it's consistently penicillins which is prescribed the most, and that's because penicillins are widely used for a number of different infections, so there should be more focus on penicillins because obviously it's treated for a wider range of infections, and if someone's using it for one, they might get resistance. It just increases the likelihood of resistance in the future. And finally, I've created a scat block which compares the total patients registered against the prescription items. And I just used the most recent data, which was for January 2015, and I just created a set because the focus needs to be on these practices where there's not so many patients registered in comparison with the rest of England, but they're prescribing a lot, and it's consistently, there are a few GP practices that are consistently prescribing a lot. Now, there might be genuine reasons why they're prescribing a lot of antibiotics, but it's just surveillance for the NHS is for them to investigate. Because one of the reasons could just be that the doctors are giving in to patients if patients ask for antibiotics and they just give them away, but it's for the NHS to investigate. And yeah, that's it. That's everything. Any question?
Great, thanks, Hash. I think I love this last story point. Picking out specific practices. What would be interesting is to see, there could be a couple in here that, like I say, just are overprescribing.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to maybe pick those practices out and then do a bit of sort of spatial analysis with proximity to hospitals, because what you might find is those practices prescribing a lot of antibiotics are basically just attached to a hospital, and so of course you've got loads of patients coming out who just had surgery or whatever, and that naturally they're fulfilling a prescription for antibiotics. But yeah, I think that's it would be nice to sort of take that story forward and just sort of explore and try and figure out are there any that you should be more aware of.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Well then, if there are no more questions, and then the next one, Sasha.
Everyone else, feel free to put things in the chat box.
Where are you? Okay, here.
Okay. Hello everybody, my name is Alexandra Cana and I'm going to be talking about a snapshot into the Postcode Lottery in the UK. So the Postcode Lottery is a situation in which the access to health services is not available in different regions depending on where you live. So there's a few newspaper articles on the Postcode Lottery that have happened recently. For example, from the BBC News, where there is no NHS funding for fertility treatments in York specifically, or the Postcode Lottery killing 6,000 cancer patients per year, or even some dementia. Just another article on dementia. I created this timeline also to show when this problem started. Effectively in the 90s, this is when the funding for the NHS was very little, and in 2008, Gordon Brown wanted to end this from happening. Though it continued until 2012, where they actually instated the Health and Social Care Act to stop this from happening, so all treatments available to all. And even it got reinforced by 2013, where they had to make policies to make sure this is happening. So I wanted to see whether this is actually true or not. So my case study was into IVF, into fertilization. And one of the stages for IVF is the induction of ovulation. This also means it's a fertility treatment for women, essentially, and it is giving them some hormones to make some eggs or make them, produce eggs. So I narrowed down the hormones to this, where you can, and I mapped the distribution of the hormones over time on the map of the UK. Here on the left, you can select the specific hormone treatment. So there is 17 available that were prescribed from 2010 to 2015. So, for example, chronic gonadotropin alpha is highly concentrated in London, and you can see on the right-hand side chart that it has had quite a few decreases over time, but also a peak in 2012, which corresponds to the time where they said it should be available to all. But it went also decreasing in 2013. And the trends are quite different for all these treatments. This might be because some of them are more commonly used, or they're just treatments that became available recently. For example, clomiphene citrate seems to be very evenly distributed all across the UK, but you can still see a decline on the items prescribed. So it's now below the average. And on the top right-hand side chart, you can see just the sum of all the hormones prescribed, and they're going down slowly. So you can also see this over time if I play. So there is a little bit of a decrease for that hormone. There is. So there are changing patterns of where you can get these hormones. So this is true. The Postcode Lottery is happening for IVF. And then I went to look into what is actually happening in Europe, because if they say there is no funding, there shouldn't be any drugs. And effectively, there is less drugs. There is, obviously, for the different treatments, there is different locations where you can find them. And this needs more, you need more information to know which drug you could use yourself, or whoever needs the fertility treatment. If you click on the bar chart, this will open up the Google search engine and tell you more about the drug itself. And you can also play the time. Ooh, it's disappeared now. And basically, you can do this. Select which measure you want, whether cost or quantity, to see the same pattern, the scatter plot of quantity over cost for the different drugs. Yeah, that's pretty much it from me. Does anybody have any questions?
So is quantity, Sasha, that's the actual kind of chemical amount, is it, rather than the number of prescriptions?
Yes, so this is the units of either a pill or an injection.
Yeah.
So every treatment depends on the person. So I thought taking the unit is the most relevant in this case.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Any question?
No.
Okay. I like the sort of the overall case study. I think it's showing just the it's a great use of a map, right? You know, the topic is this postcode lottery, and so just showing that clearly there are hot spots and not spots. I guess you could call them.
Yeah.
I think on the York tab, it's I think the charts, the story kind of suffers a bit because it's you've gone into a sort of specific area, and so have cut down the amount of data quite a lot, and so your charts aren't really, apart from the bottom right, aren't really showing much.
Yeah, the filter.
You know, it's maybe showing all the hormones that are available across the area, and you know, the story in York is that there isn't funding. Well, you know, what is the funding profile? Is that based on sort of funding has been slowing down, so therefore the amount that people are getting is dropping? It's sort of I don't know. I wonder if it was just a case of reusing the case study slide and just focusing, clicking on York and seeing, right, let's see the profile there, whether that would have answered the same the question better. I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I do have the one for York, but just as a total one. So this is the reference line for York.
Okay.
But yeah, it doesn't show much fluctuations in the item quantity.
Yeah. There's a small drop there, I guess, but yeah, it's not something major. But okay. Yeah, no, thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, and one other thing I had with the front page of the timeline, it takes screenshots. I know it's sort of nice to embed pages, but
yeah,
you never know whether they're going to kill a page or whatever. So if you're putting in headlines, just take a quick screenshot and drop in the image rather than the web page itself.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so next one, Alex. Here you are.
Click share. Seems to be. Okay. There we go.
Okay, right now.
Okay. So the screen will pop up. I'm missing something. Okay, cool. Right. So mine was picked up a Daily Mail report on prescriptions, and supposedly we're a nation of pill poppers, and we managed to have a surge of 50% in the last decade or so, up to 1 billion. So, and supposedly this is driven by a surge in antidepressants, painkillers, statins, diabetics drugs. So I thought I would see what we could deduce from this. Now, I did slightly panic earlier when I saw Nico's graph and it said 50% increase over 5 years, but that was just antidepressants, so can breathe a sigh of relief. So how have they gone up by 50% last year? So I've taken. Right. So I've taken my top grey line here, and this is the total number. The grey line at the top is the total number of prescriptions for the last 4 years. I've taken the last 4 years because I thought I
I cut out 2010, 2015 because there wasn't data for the full year. This would just skew it enormously. At the bottom, I put in the, going on the Office of National Statistics is the population for Britain for the last, for the corresponding year. So you can see relative to the growth, population is relatively static. So how much of that growth is in prescription usage is down to population growth, not much. Population hasn't really grown much relative to it. So and this pink line just shows the kind of difference between the two, really. So we can see that the growth in prescriptions is not due to population growth. So then at the bottom here, I've got my year-on-year prescriptions, the grey again representing total number of prescriptions. My blue line here is relative to the previous year, so I'm measuring my prescriptions year-on-year, as it were. And we can see this kind of gradual increase over time. And then using some filters, I'm a bit hesitant to use them at this stage in case it crashes anything, but I've got here measuring my total prescriptions against net cost being the main cost, particularly towards the NHS. So you can see there is a kind of correlation, obviously, between how many prescriptions there are and the net cost, but how this varies per sort of drug area, as it were, certainly investigating. So what could this, and so has it increased by 50% over the last 10 years? Well, unfortunately, I haven't got the data that goes right back to 2013, but using the trend line, we do get an equation. I've had to find it, and we can use, where is it? It's in there. It's playing a bit hard to find. But using the equation, we can sort of make a rough estimate at least and decide, is this, if it increased by 50%, is these last 4 years, are they consistent with the previous 10 years or whatever? But the thing I did find at least was if this trend, this grey trend that we see here, was consistent from over the last decade, then drug use is actually, prescription use has only gone up by 20%, not 50%. And that's including for population growth. So I've got something slightly different there. So in any case, what could these drugs come down to? So I've mapped, let's go on to the next one. So I've mapped here, again, prescriptions where I've broken it down by particular chapter regions, looking at every time. And yes, there is quite a bit of noise here, which I'd like to want to edit, but I think it does at least draw attention to these spikes here, which is the same one every October, which is immunological products and vaccines. So there seems to be, every October, every year, an enormous spike in vaccines going on, so presumably going back to school or having flu jabs or something like that, perhaps. And then I've found here, I'm using these, breaking down by chapter and prescription. What I wanted to see is, can I find the prescriptions every year, the numbers of prescriptions should be relatively consistent, really. We're expecting it to be 25% in 2010, 25%, 25%, 25%. So is there a case where there's a big surge in prescriptions in one particular year, say, I don't know, 50%, that takes, so if 1 year makes up 50% over my 4 years, that's quite a surge in prescription usage in a particular year. And this chart just highlights that and aids the investigating of why there's a particularly high number of prescriptions in that particular year. And then here I've tried to break down, looking at the original Daily Mail quote was about antidepressants, painkillers, statins, and diabetics drugs. So I've grouped these together to see is there a surge or not. So again, I think it's quite interesting to look at the time. And then finally, how does this compare nationwide? So I've just mapped again I'd encourage and put my chapter name at the top here, and then using the drug filter, we can then see how these have developed over time. So I'm just going to pick out a drug. It's probably going to crash. So if it doesn't. and we can see, at least over time, how this evolves. So, yeah, that's something. So, perhaps I should have put it on a year first, that would have made a bit more sense. Yeah. I picked out one with no data. But anyway, that's about it really. So just mapping out. So in conclusion, I didn't find that the drugs rate had gone up by 50% if the current trend that we had data for was consistent over 10 years. Did I find it was particularly down to a particular surge in those particular 4 drugs? Not really. So I think it's more a little bit more complex than that. But yeah, that's it.
Any questions?
Okay, thanks, Alex. Just for sort of a bit of feedback, I think the if you can go on the second, have prescriptions increased that much? So I like the sort of introduction of, sort of just dispelling a myth straight away that, prescriptions are increasing because population has exploded in this country. So that sort of shows that it's doesn't seem to be true. The year on year, I thought that could be simplified a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot going on in that chart.
Yeah.
You also have a double axis, which is seems to be synchronized. So it could clear an axis. There's an argument maybe that it could just be a 12-month rolling average, just to you're trying to get across obviously there's an upward trend, but throughout the year. But really we're just comparing sort of one year against the other, and you can compare at this month level, but it's quite different to compare the two of them together.
Yes.
Maybe a different color as well might have. And then okay, but then I wasn't so sure about the second the third story point. So what drugs are these down to?
Mm-hmm. This one. I've just clicked on it. Yeah.
That one. Yeah, there we go. So I thought the subject of of this is really the bottom right-hand chart, right? So you picked out your thing you're focusing on is the news article.
Yes.
It's and it picks out these specific drugs. So let's start with the story. They highlighted these are the ones that we're going to focus on, and find out if it is down to these.
Yes.
And then look at various aspects that describe the trend through these, and whether if there is an increase, there's an increase in antidepressants, a sort of spike by the looks of it there. What drove that, or are there certain surgeries, certain areas that are increasing that the news article could be on, but other areas are decreasing, so net is kind of zero. But yeah, I think the one at the top, every year loads of people get flu jabs, and it's pushing down any other data to the floor really. So you're not really getting anything from it. And there's just sort of too much in the table. There's just too much sort of white space. So again, maybe just sort of I get what you're trying to see, whether there's just some surges or whatever in a certain drug each year, but there's just too much. You've got a big long scroll bar, and there's just too much white space to actually sort of get something out.
Okay.
So I think the bones of the story are really good. I just think there's sort of a little bit of refinement around, right? Where is the story going, and where you're trying to drive the user's attention.
Okay. Well, thank you.
But I think you were very. I think this is connected live, isn't it?
Yes.
Is this connected live to the database? This one?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware. Yeah. Yeah, it's not an extract. So.
Oh, are you guys back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We lost you for a second there. Okay, cool. Now I was just asking, is this one connected live to the database?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yeah, I think you definitely get bonus points for that one. it's a very gutsy move. No, that's great. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you, Craig. Cheers.
So Damiana is the next one.
Cool. So basically, for this one, Craig, this one is connected live as well. Do I get bonus points too?
Sure.
By the way, about that, how does it work if we want to publish it to Tableau Public?
Okay, well, we can figure that out offline afterwards.
Okay, cool. So basically, for this one, I started with an hypothesis. Do people that live in rural area actually get more drugs prescribed than people that live in cities? Because my thinking was, maybe they go to the doctor and the doctor thinks, I may or may not prescribe it. What if they get worse? It might be really hard for them to reach a pharmacy or something similar. So I wanted to look into this hypothesis and see if there was any merit to it. In order to do so, basically, I've downloaded the urban coding classification from the data.gov.uk website, and I've joined this one within Exasol, created a new view, and I'm connected live to this one. So here is what I have found out. So starting point is that drugs are drugs. It doesn't matter where you live. Here you can see going from the most rural places. Oh yeah, I have something to precise. Rank number 1 is most rural areas. Rank number 6 is most urban areas. So basically what you can see, actually, it doesn't matter if you come from the middle of nowhere or if you come from London, the drugs that you will ask for are pretty much the same. What changes instead are your chances of going home with a prescription. So what you can see here is that basically 37.5% of the total prescriptions come out of GPs that are in the most rural areas, so just ranked 1 and 2, which is a discrepancy that's not necessarily accounted for because there are very few people that live there. If you basically join both of them, that's a 12% of all population. So the percentage doesn't seem to be justified. And it's not as if areas with more rural population actually ask more prescriptions. Actually, my idea might simply be wrong, because it's not as if you have more people that live in the middle of nowhere, you prescribe more. There does not seem to be a significant relation. Surely, outliers seem to be in that trend line. But there are so many points here that don't fit within this trend line at all. Also, this model can be crazy low R-squares, so I wouldn't trust it. So I went and looked at another approach. So it would appear that the reason why rural GPs prescribe so much is that, for starters, there are way more GPs in rural areas than there are in urban areas. You can see in the first graph, top left, that they have, while all the other areas that even have 1 GP per 10,000 people, GP practices, rural areas have almost 1.5 for 10,000 people. Not only that, but it would appear that GPs also tend to prescribe more with each order. So basically, you go there, and not only you will have your prescription, but you might actually have a prescription for more items, rather than if you just went to a city GP. And it would seem that some of them really kind of lose it, because if you look at the GPs that spend the most out of all GPs that spend most, the 10 GPs that basically prescribe most drugs, 7 out of 10 come out of these rural areas, which is scary, because here, for example, here you have Birmingham, then you have Nottingham, and then you have York, which are quite big places. But who has ever heard of County Durham? Oh. Well, you know, apart from the English people here, but they do seem to be quite keen on prescription items. So maybe someone should give them the memo that, you know, okay, maybe pharmacies are not that near, but maybe you shouldn't prescribe that many drugs either. It's not good for the health system. Finally, bonus slide that's got nothing to do with the presentation, but I had to hammer my point in. So apparently, you know how they tell you, you go live in the country for your heart and for your nerves? It doesn't matter, because you can see here that they prescribe just the same drugs, if not more, for your heart and for your nerves that they do in the city. There's no point to moving to the country in the first place. So that is all from me, and yeah, thank you very much.
Any questions?
Damian, that's I love it. It's fantastic. I think the key thing you got right in this is just to sort of focus down to one really core subject, and just look at every aspect of it and twist it and turn it and see what you could find. I think it's sort of even just starting off with number of practices in urban. It's like, well, yeah, okay, there's bound to be more. They've got people don't want to travel or can't travel tens or hundreds of miles to get to a GP, so likely there is going to be more. But then I love showing how much the more they prescribe. I mean, even I think this one at the end is a fantastic one. Although would like to see the profile of ages, whether that's an influence. I know there's no sort of age data about who was getting the prescriptions, but whether it was, just older people out in the country pushing the cardiovascular system and central nervous system up. I don't know. I thought it was great and really nice color scheme and everything right the way through.
Oh, thank you. Tips for style, how I can make it like a bit more engaging, a bit more. I don't know. I keep thinking that it's super boring. Yeah.
No, I think it's really clean and just key core message, which was consistent all the way through. It's really good.
Okay, thank you very much.
I forgot.
So, my turn. Oh, one moment, because I have some problems with the size, I think. Yeah, well, we are not going to see anything with this size. Wow. Okay. So, my subject and the information I focus in this week is in analyzing the prescriptions for dementia. Okay. The reason I decided this, you will see in the second story point. But well, first, I include here in the first story point some basic information about dementia with links to Wikipedia and to some specialized societies and organizations. So if anyone, when I uploaded it in Tableau Public, has any doubts or doesn't know much about dementia, can directly in the dashboard have a little bit more of information with the types of dementia that exists, etc. And well, the reason why I decided to focus on this was because I started looking in the World Health Organization about death causes in high-income countries. And what I saw is that, this is for the resolution, but no problem, that dementia is actually the fourth highest cause of death in high-income countries, as projected by the World Health Organization, and it's gonna suppose 500,000 deaths in high-income countries. And the projections of this organization says that it's gonna increase to more than 700,000 deaths in the 2030, and will be the third highest cause of death. And as you can see in the right graphic, it's going to be also the second with the biggest increase after the lower respiratory infections, and will increase 38% in deaths in these countries in the next 15 years. In the UK, that we can also access some information through different datasets through the web. The total deaths in UK has been around 600,000, more or less, during the last 15 years in total deaths, and the deaths caused by dementia passed from 24,000 in 21 to the 41,000 in 2013, and they are like 7.4 of deaths in the UK are caused by dementias. And here in the right graph, you have the number of deaths by dementia per age. So the biggest, the two of every 3 deaths by dementia are people with 85 years or over, and the rest of people with less age. In the treatments, what we can see, and this is data from the dataset, what we can see, for example, here in the left, is that the total items prescribed for dementia has increased very constantly during the years until the more than 200,000 items in March of 2015. But the total net ingredient cost has increased until 2012, more or less, middle of 2012, and then it gets down in very, very, very fast. The reason of this is that one of the main drugs, Aricept, expires its patent, and this means that some generics arrive to the market, and it causes a descending of 56% in total costs. So here you can also see, well, you can filter all this information by year, for example, if you want to see the trends in only 1 year, and you can also see the total ingredient costs and total items by brands and generics. And if you can also filter, for example, we see that generics, the total income price has decreased a lot, but for example in brands, the prescriptions and the costs has increased during time. And also, it's necessary if anyone is interested in one particular product, you can filter the information and see the information for that concrete product. Also, it was very interesting because if we see it in a map view with the postal code in the map and the strategic health authorities areas in the right, some drugs are very focused on certain zones of the UK. Well, we can see, for example, here with higher color and size, the zones with more items prescribed for dementia, right here. And for example, there are some drugs, I will select all of them, that are very focused and very concentrated in certain areas of the UK. For example, if I don't remember badly, with the brands, it's more clear where each brand that are not generics has the most prescription, and you could also filter for a concrete SHAA. And finally, just to have some fun, I just imagine if we were in the data school, we were investing in a new dementia product. So here I make whoa, the size of this is not very good. Well, it's a matter of the resolution finally. My idea was to select how much money we want to invest in our product right here with the slider. Select the duration of the patent right here, the price that we want to sell the product, and the market share that we expect to have during the period. And here, but let me see if we can. No, but. And here you will see a message if you, with the data you introduce, you will get enough money until the expiration of the patent to recover the money you invest. So, for example, if you sell it a very low price and have a very low market share, it will tell you that it's not a good scenario and that you will have some losses. And this was it. Any questions? Greg, are you there? No?
The beauty of a mute button. So I love the the cleanness of this. I think the colors going right through it, and it just made a nice consistent workbook. What do you think was kind of the if you could say something that you you learned through sort of exploring this, because you've sort of gone through, just generally what is dementia, and then looking at how it's treated through UK. As you were sort of exploring, was there anything particularly you felt you learned?
Well, yes. First of all, very curious how the expiration of a patent in a drug can affect the costs that is spent in that kind of drug, and also how the localization of the drugs. How some drugs are very focalized and very focused on certain areas.
Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I like the how in the previous one where you got the patent expiring. You could just looked at the cost and thought, well, wow, usage has suddenly dramatically decreased. It looks like it was increasing consistently, and now it's gone. And it continues decreasing. But of course, now as the more and more generics come online, that they're driving the costs down, right? And you can show it through just the number of items that are generally being plotted. I like the breaking out, creating your own year filters and making it very specific that you want to do that. It was good. I think it's a nice sort of it's quite detailed story, but focusing on one particular area. I think it was doing well. And I must admit the annotations, your point annotations, I've never ever seen them styled like that. I think it looks really good. Just never taken the time to experiment like that. I'm going to from now on. I'm going to call it the Pablo style. They look really good.
Thank you. Well, and next one, Ravi, your turn. You're prepared?
Just about. I have nothing to recap. Okay, cool. Okay, so first up, hi, I'm Ravi, to anyone that hasn't tuned in before. What our project this week was to look at prescription data using, firstly, SQL to investigate rather than connecting directly to Tableau, because there was a lot of rows, so 519 million. And learning a bit of code and seeing what came out through a bit of exploratory before sort of doing the Tableau shuffle, as Craig calls it. So I personally had never used SQL before, so using this program Exasol to do some coding was very new to me, if I can do. So here you can see a couple of the queries I ran and the tables that I got on the other side, followed by a view I created, which I then extracted into Tableau to connect to that specific view within the dataset, and then create an extract so I could do some work on the train. That's my excuse, Craig. So this is my output. It is a dashboard which is showing what is most prescribed. And on the right-hand side, you can see it's only for 2014. So I've limited the rows to just show the year 2014 and the months through that. And on the emojis are the chapter names. Now, what I wanted to do initially, my first plan was I wanted to have a map of the human body where you could click through each part of the human body and see what medicines were affecting that, what drugs were prescribed a specific part. What I found very quickly once I started looking through is there's a lot of overlap between a lot of the classifications already, so it wouldn't be very quick and easy to put these classifications in through SQL. So I stuck to the chapter names given by the dataset, and as you can see here, I've assigned them a generic icon set, the emojis. And if you start clicking through, it then changes both the statement up here and the graph here to show the top 5 for each year. So you can click through anesthesia, the appliances, the cardiovascular system, the central nervous system. One of the most interesting ones for me was the eye, where you can see a very obvious increase where the sort of hay fever months come in. And another interesting part for me that I found was the difference between this and, say, another eye drop, say, down here, is that the amount of aqua, so this is 0.5% and this is 2%. So to rehydrate an eye, they're prescribing higher dose drugs there. And the most, prescribed drug was actually a nutrition and blood one, which you look through here. And that was actually like a milkshake, Ensure Plus, which is a 12-flavor milkshake, if anyone's interested, which was prescribed 220 million times. Now, a caveat to this is, when I was talking to Sasha about this, she mentioned that this also includes the things like appliances, includes stuff that's used within hospitals. So within hospitals, they might give this sort of product to recovering patients to get all their nutrients after a surgery or a disease. Similarly, when I looked at, I think there's a water down here somewhere. The drug preparations, perhaps. Here it is, yeah. There's a pure water. And again, Damian mentioned that, there are some, because after some sort of therapies and surgeries, you have your immune system is shot to bits, basically. So you can't have anything that may contain some sort of infection. So I found that quite interesting. And also interesting to me was the ear, which is actually all of these here that you see in the top 5 are not to do with the ear, they're all to do with the mouth. So you have mouthwash, some oral rinses, etc. So yeah, this dashboard isn't so much telling a story, it's more of an exploratory one. But I think you can still garner some sort of value from it if you're doing just saying, well, okay, tell me about the prescriptions in the UK. If I was to do this differently or had more time, I would want to change this to disappear or show a different statement. Say, for instance, click below to drill in deeper, which I wasn't able to do in the time frame provided. But I did learn a lot about using dashboard actions and a case Wednesday, which Nico showed me earlier, which allowed me to do the filter through, as well as a bit of problem solving with Brian, where I looked at why my filter wasn't working initially, because what it was doing was showing me the top 5 for the entire data set. When if I once I did the dashboard action as a filter, I could then add that as context, so it would go first before then me being able to drill down by the chapter area. And yeah, any questions? Listen.
No questions?
Okay, I think I love the sort of the layout is sort of a quick exploration, and the way you can sort of quickly click between these different areas, and you've dumbed having looked at the classifications and everything, it's now you kind of dumbed down to make them readable by anybody.
Yeah.
And of course the
about
the skull emoji, but the having the icons again just makes quite a complex topic really easy to digest and explore.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you focus on 2014 specifically?
Well, the 2015 dataset wasn't a full dataset, and the latest one was 2014.
Okay, but why? So by focusing on 2014, you've sort of said, right, I'm going to explore the quantity through the year.
Yeah.
What was it? I mean, obviously you could see the story with which one was it you clicked? Sorry, So people like myself who suffer from hay fever. I go tablets, I don't go eye drops, but you can see that there's specifically one there. Were there any other areas that had sort of an annual trend?
Respiratory systems have a similar increase, but this was to do with allergies as well. So, for instance, they here with hay fever and other allergies. Although I said it could be due to sort of people getting the asthma treatments again, because people do like to do exercise and are more active during the summer months, so might revert back to their inhaler, which they might not need in other times of the year. Just trying to think what else. I think there was the gastrointestinal was quite interesting, because here you see 2 instances of Gaviscon. So Gaviscon, this one here and this one. But the spike here you can see is because this one here they've stopped prescribing it, or they've changed it, or like said this is a preferred one. So this one's shot up because it's now getting all of these prescriptions. It could be an explanation. And then so the main one is due to constipation, which seems to pick up around those times. And similar to something that Emily mentioned when we were talking earlier in the week was vaccines. I think October might be the time where elderly people are scheduled for their sort of vaccines, because the highest one is...
Yeah, it's when the flu vaccine marketing starts.
Yeah. So you have the influenza, but you also have the Immuvac and the Pneumovax. So I'm guessing that's sort of just keep you immune and to do with pneumonia.
I guess what I kind of so there are a few that definitely do. Oh yeah, infections. Definitely do have an annual trend. I guess the way you could have improved this sort of the icons and exploring stuff is by maybe grouping them.
Okay.
So showing, doing some filtering yourself and some analysis, and then showing it in the dashboard to say, right, these ones that are very seasonal, these ones aren't, but maybe our usage is decreasing, and so for those ones you go for a longer term.
Yeah.
So you go from the full 2010 to 2015 to show that the usage is decreasing.
Sure. Yeah.
And so to just pick, because everything's these are they all have their own little story.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could group them together as based on their trend type. So just to aid that exploration.
Yeah.
And then I also thought the lines themselves could have done with some sort of labeling.
Oh, okay.
A way to just get an indication of what each of these drugs are. And I know it's quite difficult when you've got 5 or 6 lines and not allowing labels to overlap, but yet showing them. And I wondered if maybe it was possible, sort of at the right-hand side of the chart, to pick out sort of the value at the end.
Yeah.
And have sort of a separate chart that shows just the name at the level that the line finishes. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a line ends label, but maybe it's sort of separate so that it's got more space.
Yeah.
So yeah, just something to just kind of aid. Again, it's really nice and simple. You get across where there is seasonality, then that story is really really well told.
Yeah.
It just refinement to help that exploration. But otherwise, I thought, yeah, it's great. Thanks. Good work.
Thank you.
And last but not least.
Hello.
Last but not least.
Actually, since we're talking about vaccines, it's actually a pretty good progression.
Nice.
I end up creating 2 halves. So since we were just talking about vaccines, I'll just walk you through this, the thing that I quickly worked on before I ditched this plan to work on my other plan. Oh, okay, the clock, sorry. Where am I? Have I seen it? Okay.
Yep.
So I'll just quickly go through this. I worked on this for like a day or so, just because I had a lot of issues with my other data set, the other business problem I wanted to take a look at. But since we were talking about vaccines, I'll just show what I had. So on the bottom here, the flu vaccine is not cheap, so I have it as a running total of net ingredient cost. So how much does it cost the system? So you see all the other vaccines are here, and the one that's constantly going bigger and bigger over the years is the flu vaccine. So even over time, as we accumulate the cost, the other vaccines can never really catch up, which obviously makes sense considering significantly more people obviously get the flu vaccine. The other chart that I wanted to talk about originally was I wanted to understand if there was a news outbreak, or if there's an outbreak somewhere and then you see it in the news, does that make you feel like you need to go take a vaccine? So I plotted vaccine uptake over time and trying to see like, oh, does that make a difference? What I found was in spots where we see like a peak, like maybe here, the baby boom, lots of babies, therefore lots of babies have to get the T-dip or D-tip, whatever. Like it's like the vaccine that you always get when you're a baby. So obviously you see a bump there, but when we had the measles outbreak, there's only like maybe a 20% increase previous month. So when you think about it as a total, it does make a difference. But relative to what we're seeing in like flu, where, you know, suddenly there's, in 2012, I think maybe the flu vaccine just got like approved by the NHS or something. So because of the crazy amount of population, it's kind of hard to compare to that, right? So as you can see, in general, it's not a very interesting story, which is why I ditched this. So the other story that I wanted to originally talk about was actually about, I wanted to understand the distribution of drugs by pharma companies across the UK. And so what I used was I used a prescription database with chemical name, category, month prescribed, quantity, postal code, and I joined that against another postal code. Oh, sorry, let me just try and slow down a bit. I'm showing you like my entire deck. Okay, so just to go over that again, what I originally wanted to understand was the distribution of drugs by pharma companies in the UK. And so what I used was the prescription database with all the variables inside that, and I joined some of those variables against postcode to the region and to the pharmaceutical company against the chemical name. So this week I spent a lot of time parsing data from web pages to pull out the chemical name with the trade name from the pharma company website, as well as trying to find a good combination that will help me aggregate from postcode to region. Lots of data prep this week. And also, it's the first time I've ever used SQL, so thank you to Damiana and Paul for like all your patience and help, because goodness knows it was definitely a learning experience. So a couple of points about the data set before I go into it. You're still alive? Yes. So when I pulled the information from Exasol, I had 10.4 million rows, and it ended up being 14 million in Tableau. So as you can probably tell, it is connected directly to Exasol, to the database. I defined market size as net ingredient cost times the quantity, and I also defined generic versus branded as a particular pattern within the BNF codes. It was really challenging to try and understand whether or not this was going to be a correct tag, because I did a lot of research about how does the pack code that tells you whether or not it's generic or branded, is that tagged correctly to this particular structure? And for the longest time I didn't know, because when I looked at the raw data, it didn't look like it. But in all honesty, I think this is a more interesting story, so we're just going to assume that this is correct and move forward with life. Also, another kink that I found when I was trying to do this exploratory, I think, research was that it wasn't possible for me to get a full drug list, because a pharma company will make like 70, 90, 100 something drugs. And the problem is that when you take that and you multiply that all by the amount of people that were buying the drug over that many years, like, it was not going to happen. I only used 25% of my original list for the 2 pharma companies that I had picked. So I originally scoured like 5 pharma companies, each with like 100 rows of data, lots of parsing, a lot of it didn't get used. So, but that is data problem. I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the learning that I did, because I definitely learned a lot this week. And this is actually a really big accomplishment for me, because I never thought that I could ever really learn SQL. If it ever decides to open. So what I did was I learned lots of things about, like, how do you select the fields even within the fields, how do you parse out characters within the fields, and where I have many, many different where conditions, how do I join them together so that I'm still able to populate the chemical drugs that I need. Also, another thing that was a huge pain, but a necessary pain, was how do you join tables in Exasol? It wasn't necessarily a pain to join the tables, but because I didn't know how to create a table, then upload a table, then import the data into the table, it was a huge roadblock, and thank goodness Damiana helped me with that. So lots learned this week. So you have to forgive me if some of my charts aren't nearly as nice as my colleagues. So the first thing I wanted to narrow in on, should this ever change, so this is actually really, really hard to read on your screen, but hopefully we can kind of make our way through it. Maybe better color choicing next time. But what I wanted to show was that for a particular drug like paracetamol, is that right? Sorry. I wanted to kind of see like what is the distribution between brand versus generic, because Novartis makes, I think, the consumer branded version that a lot of people are highly associated with, but there's also a generic brand. So from a market size standpoint in each of these postcodes, what does that distribution look like? And it seems like people are pretty committed to their paracetamol being branded because you can barely see the generic stuff. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But what I really wanted to create with this particular data set was to allow people to explore companies' distribution categories of these different drugs by regions. Is it particularly slow? Okay. So yeah, so what I have here is comparing market size, actually it should be market sizes as in market valuation sizes across regions by postcodes. So the different colors represent each particular county and the particular dots are a postcode. So I mean, what I have here is actually, I think I have it set on paracetamol, right? So I feel like you're not really seeing anything interesting because it's a very consumer drug that probably follows the, population patterns. But what I found interesting was that when you change it to something like drugs used in diabetes, specifically that are produced by Novartis, you can see that it changes quite a bit. You'll eventually see that it changes. Yeah, you see that it changes by quite a bit, right? By the market size valuation. So it kind of tells me something that I don't necessarily know about that particular population, because, it's obviously not following the population size. Another one that I noticed that was kind of interesting, I think, was this one. Anti-leptic. Yeah, so eventually you see spacing that is a little bit less skewed. So still kind of follows the population patterns, but you'll see like greater clustering in the middle, which I didn't really expect. So I think that in terms of being able to achieve an understanding of what is the distribution of market sizes, this is probably particularly useful if you actually work as a pharma sales rep. Then you can kind of see like where you want to be pushing your product. Maybe if I put in a couple more dynamics with like pricing, this might actually be a pretty useful dashboard. But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to create.
Questions?
When you set market size, is it affected by price, or is it?
So it's net ingredient cost multiplied by quantity.
Okay. So I was just wondering the branded paracetamol bubbles.
Yep.
Is it possible that the unbranded is so small because they're just crazy cheap compared to?
Totally. Yeah. So that's a good point. I mean, I probably should have put quantity on that instead of market size.
I just want to add to that, like paracetamol, the unbranded one is like 50p.
Oh yeah, so it's very unfair.
One is like
Yeah.
£5. So it's like what?
No, that's fair. Let's see actually what happens if I were to actually just change it to market size. If I change it to quantity, let's see what happens. Come on. Oh, there you go. Much better. Eventually you'll see it, but it doesn't tell a different story.
I found that too with my hormone drugs, the quantity and items was the same line, just like about in the thousands.
Yeah, fair enough. So, no, I totally agree with you there. I mean, I didn't really think about that till just now.
Okay.
But that's absolutely a fair point. I gave another, I don't know why, I had actually the reverse thought when I thought about market sizing if I should have done quantity on the map. But the thing is, if you were, say, for instance, a pharma company and you were using this, different drugs have different margins. So you actually might want to understand what the market size is because at the end of the day, yeah, so it changes a little bit in the,
not much.
in the quantity. But,
Okay.
yeah.
And Miss, sorry, why did you focus on London specifically? Is it just to cut down the amount of data so you could?
It really is.
Get focused in an area. Okay.
Totally. I mean, I didn't expect that this particular idea to have been so large. I genuinely thought that it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to pick a couple of drug companies and then we'll be able to see some of that. And I actually thought that being able to limit by, let's say, 5 drug companies and relatively long list of drugs, fair enough. But I didn't really think about how popular the drugs I selected were.
Sure.
So just because as a result of pulling in like 14 million rows, I had to be a little bit more sparse with like what kind of story I could tell.
Yeah. Okay. I think maybe I noticed you disaggregated the latitude longitude, so you're showing like exact locations of GP practices.
Yeah.
What you could have maybe had sort of a 2-stage map with this to have this effect of zooming in, but maybe be able to see across the UK and see different differences in different areas is left that long on average, and then stuck something like SHA or I think it was Primary Care Trust as well, onto level of detail, and so you'd have had fewer bubbles across the map, and then you could have seen if there were differences, really sort of standout differences between different regions, and or don't even map it, put it as a bar chart or something, and then have a 2-click process to allow you to then drill down into a full map.
Okay, I can play around with that.
Okay. But overall, I mean, I like the some reason I always smile whenever I see a dark map and loads of colors. It's like fireworks. So good. Great, thanks, and thanks everybody. It's a great job. Now, another first time using a proper database and having one that's got 500 million records is a pretty tough way to start. But yeah, thanks so much. And just as kind of a summary, I did sort of promise that we'd sort of look at how efficient you've been with your queries. So I think whenever you next see...
from processing all that data?
I think when you next see Robin, sort of owe him a few beers, because the impact of training was quite good. So actually, Pablo, do you want to switch present around? Just to me, and I can show you what I've been looking at.
This is going to be me just like on it for like 6 hours.
There's me.
Okay.
Where's who?
So here's just generally the breakdown. There are a couple of you who avoided the 500 million row club. So that those are people who managed to run a query to return absolutely everything. So congratulations to Hash and to Nico. You avoided that. You're in the prestigious few who avoided the 500 million row club. There was definitely though a difference between when you got the SQL training and before when you were kind of just playing around. If you just look at sort of the number of spikes, so this is around the training time, right away halfway through, and you can just see number of times hitting the full row count before, and then just occasionally sort of there's maybe like 3 times after, but with loads of activity. Which is fantastic, and execution times are all down. So I think the training definitely had a big impact, and you were using the system loads. I mean, loads of queries being fired off. So I thought of there's a couple of different ways I've been looking at this. So the total row count and execution. So yeah, the Hash and Nico managed to avoid the top area.
Yeah, he was going around looking at us.
He was looking at everyone else's.
Which one do you want to see?
No, I'm just saying Nico was going around seeing what everyone else's tables were coming out as.
Ah, right, okay. That's a good way to do it. Yeah, and just stealing the good queries, right? And then, in fact, actually, I saw Alex. I felt sorry for you because you were doing absolutely awesome, loads and loads and loads of queries, really quick times, low row counts, and you went whoops, and you hit 1.
What time was that?
So what was that? Oh, you were working. You were burning the midnight oil. That was like, yeah. I think this is European time, so that'd be like 20 to 9.
I spelled the T. That's what it was.
And then just to sort of show before and after the training, so average row counts and average execution times. I think they all just came down, right? The row counts are returning a lot more efficient. Doing loads more queries since before the training. Emily, you still stand out here, and your efficiency just went sky high. Ravi again, double the amount of queries you're running and row counts right down. So I guess there's it's not a big surprise, no SQL training and sort of playing around versus SQL training. So yeah, you've definitely you've made some great progress with use there. Now I am going to try and pick out a winner for sort of what I've seen, the output and general sort of efficiency. I'm going to mull it over, and then I'll let you know probably Monday as to who I think.
Okay.
Okay. With that, guys, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Craig.
Cheers for your help this week.
All right. Catch you all later.
See you soon.
Bye.
Nice weekend.
Bye.